And welcome back to EDH Deck Building. I am your host, Demo, and this is Brewing with Underwhelming Commanders, episode 30. And we were back to normal form here, so I'm going off of the poll from the last video. And our number 3 commander this time is Kazuul, Tyrant of the Cliffs. 3 red, Ogre Warrior 5/4. Whenever a creature an opponent controls attacks, if you're the defending player, create a 3/3 red Ogre creature token unless that creature's controller pays 3. So this is such a unique, interesting card because it's sort of like a Pillow Fort effect, but in mono red, which you don't see very often. And I think that's why a lot of people don't go after this commander. This is one of those commanders that I think you could have any theme in mono red, that you just want a particular theme, and having this as your commander is just a nice way to keep people from attacking you, right? It's unlikely they're going to want to pay the 3 for those attacking creatures. So that's going to spit out an Ogre token, which you more than likely can just use to chump block. So you're going to be preventing a lot of the damage that gets dealt to you. Of course, if we're building a deck around this guy, we want to entice our opponents to be attacking, and goad effects are probably the best bet here. Disrupt Decorum or Besmirch. There's a bunch of them now. They've really been going hard on the goad themes lately. And goading is great because it can sort of be a bit of a win con here, where obviously we're getting our opponents to attack, but we're getting them to attack our opponents and in turn killing our opponents. But we don't mind getting attacked as well, so we can just entice our opponents to attack with cards like Fumuko the Blowblood, which is going to force our opponent's creatures to attack each combat if able. So now they can choose to attack us if they want to, but then they're going to have to pay 3, or we get the Ogre token, or they can just attack our other opponents, which is great too. Trove of Temptation is an interesting one that I really never see in a commander game. 3 and a red enchantment. Each opponent must attack you or a planeswalker you control with at least 1 creature each combat if able. So now we are enticing our opponents to attack. We're making them attack us, in fact. But that might not be a bad thing. And at the beginning of your end step, create a colorless treasure token. Pretty interesting card. Also, we can throw in classics like Rite of the Raging Storm because we're doing that theme of we want our opponents to be attacking. We sort of want everyone to be attacking, I think. Goblin Spymaster and Goblin Diplomats are also great here. Goblin Spymaster, at the beginning of each opponent's end step, that player creates a 1/1 red Goblin creature token with creatures you control attack each combat if able. And Goblin Diplomats, we can just tap and have each creature attack this turn if able. So this we can use obviously at instant speed. So we're going to wait for the right opponent that we want to force an attack on, and it's going to be the person who, you wait after their main phase and they've tapped out so they can't pay the 3 and they got a bunch of creatures. You're going to force all their creatures to attack, so now they have to attack. Again, if they attack us, we get the ogres. If they attack someone else, that's good too. Total War and Heatstroke are just fantastic fits in a Kazuul deck, I think. I talked about this in my Crazy Red Enchantments video. There is a lot of really great red enchantments when it comes to combat. Total War is going to force our opponents to essentially attack with all their creatures, right? 3 and a red enchantment. Whenever a player attacks with 1 or more creatures, destroy all untapped non-wall creatures that player controls that didn't attack, except for creatures that player has controlled continuously since the beginning of the turn. So essentially, if they want to attack, they have to attack with all of their creatures that don't have summoning sickness, or they will get destroyed. So it's going to make some tough decisions for our opponents, and Heatstroke is just an auto include in a Kazuul deck, I think, because at the end of combat, destroy each creature that blocked or was blocked this turn. So now if our opponents want to attack us, even if they have a giant creature, all we have to do is chump with one of our 3/3 ogres that we're going to be making, and then their creature's going to die as well. So that's a great fit in here, without question. Chaos Sphere, I think, is another great fit in this deck. Mentioned this recently on my World Enchantment video because it is a World Enchantment. Creatures with flying can block only creatures with flying. Creatures without flying have reach. So why am I putting this in the deck? Well, because flying creatures are really going to give us an issue, right? If our opponent attacks with a dragon, they can forego paying the 3, but we're still going to take the damage because we can't block. So this way, all of our creatures, all those ogres that we're spitting out, are going to be able to block flying creatures. So it's going to be a great fit. Monarch effects work great because we are in a little bit of a Pillow Fort strategy. So Court of Ire or Emberwelled Captain. It's going to be card draw for us. It's going to give us additional advantage as well if we're the Monarch, which we should be able to hold on to for quite some time, right? At the beginning of your upkeep, Court of Ire deals 2 damage to any target. If you're the Monarch, it deals 7 damage to that player or permanent instead. That's pretty darn good, and we can just shoot our opponents in the face with this if we want. Emberwild Captain, whenever an opponent attacks you while you're the Monarch, it deals damage to that player equal to the number of cards in their hand. So again, these can even be sort of win win cons in the deck for us. I also really like Coveted Jewel. In general, I like Coveted Jewel, but I also like it in this deck because it fits good in a Pillow Fort strategy, right? 6 mana artifact. When it enters the battlefield, we get to draw 3 cards and it taps to add 3 mana of any color. But whenever one or more creatures an opponent controls attack you and aren't blocked, they get to gain control of it and draw 3 cards themselves. But that shouldn't be a big issue in this deck. We can block those creatures. They attack us as long as they're blocked, we're fine. We just got to make sure they don't get through with an unblocked creature. We are going to be having creatures enter the battlefield a lot, and I think In the Web of War and Ogre Battle Driver are great here, even though it might not initially seem so, right? Both of these are whenever a creature enters the battlefield under our control, it gets +2/+0 and gains haste until end of turn. So this seems like a weird fit because when we spit out those Ogre tokens, it's going to be on our opponent's turn. Giving them a boost in haste doesn't seem great, but it kind of does because now those 3/3 Ogres are going to be 5/3 Ogres, and it's going to be a lot less likely our opponent's going to want to attack us and lose their creature. And then obviously on our turn, any creatures we're playing are going to get that boost as well. And of course, Warstorm Surge and its lesser known counterpart, Electropotence, are also great here for the same reason. Again, these can be like win cons, where now if our opponent doesn't pay, not only do we get the Ogre token, but we're going to get to throw some damage around as well, right? Again, these are sort of win cons in the deck, and it's going to be less likely that our opponents are going to want to attack us. And we don't always have to be chumping with those Ogre tokens, right? If our opponent attacks and we can just say, all right, I'll take the damage. I actually want to keep my Ogre token so that I can attack with it later. And you can use cards like Merkidia's Downfall and Crown of Doom, both cards that I've mentioned before on my channel that I think are great in any sort of an aggro strategy. This isn't really an aggro strategy. It's a little bit of a reverse aggro. It's weird, you know, that's why this commander, I think, confuses a lot of people. But you are spitting out a lot of those Ogre tokens. You don't have to block with them. And when you get a bunch, you can now attack. And Merkidia's Downfall is going to give attacking creatures +1/+0 until end of turn for each non-basic land defending player controls. And we don't even have to use this on our creatures. Again, we are in a little bit of a goad or forcing attack theme. So we can wait till our opponent attacks another opponent, use this on their creatures. Crown of Doom, same thing. We're going to donate this to an opponent. It's going to boost our creatures when we attack, but also it boosts our opponent's creatures when they attack them if they're forced to attack. So both of those cards are going to be great fits here. We're in a heavy creature theme probably, so Slate of Ancestry might be a great card draw option for you. 4 mana artifact, pay 4 and tap, discard your hand, draw a card for each creature you control, right? So if we get 3 or 4 Ogre tokens, this can be pay 4 and draw 4 or 5 cards. Pretty darn good. Really interesting commander, I think, because you're doing a sort of Pillow Fort effect in mono red. That can be, I think, a little confusing for people, but there is a lot you can do here. I think it's a pretty great commander. But moving on to our number 2 commander this week, and it is Ith High Arcanist. And this one I was dreading a little bit. It's one that I had looked at a few times, and it is a really, really tough one. So 5 white and a blue, human wizard 3/5 with vigilance, has suspend 4 white and a blue, and unfortunately you cannot suspend from the command zone, which makes this really, really tough. It would be nice if you could. I think it would be really neat if the rules committee said, yeah, you can suspend from the command zone because this is the only commander that does that. So it would really only apply to Ith and no other commander. You still got to wait 4 turns to get it, right? But it is just a little bit of an easier way because obviously when they made this card, they didn't think that anybody would be hard casting it for 7 mana. That's a lot. Using the suspend is a lot easier. Unfortunately, you can't do that from the command zone. You can use a command beacon, right? So I would obviously put a command beacon in this deck without question. Put your commander into your hand, then you can suspend it. You can throw a Weathered Wayfarer in here as well to maybe go get your command beacon if you want to use it. You know, there's not a lot of options here in Azorius Colors for this kind of stuff. Command beacon and Weathered Wayfarer are both good cards though, so you could just put them in your deck anyway and just hope that you get them. But if we can suspend it or cast it the normal way, what's it going to do? Well, it is a Maze of Ith, right? For those who don't know, this is the Ith from Maze of Ith fame. So you tap them, untap a target attacking creature, prevent all combat damage that would be dealt to and dealt by that creature this turn. So it is just a really, really expensive Maze of Ith. Now, what are you going to do with that? There's not a lot. I'll be honest, it's tough. One of the things you could do with it, though, that I thought would be interesting is you can do a little bit of an untapping theme here, right? Because this does untap a creature. So you could use, for example, inspired creatures. And there's quite a few in white and blue. You attack with them. And then, of course, because they have inspired, when they become untapped, you get some effect. And you can just do that with your commander. So, for example, Arbiter Chapter of the ideal. We can attack with it and then immediately untap it. It's not going to do any damage. If we want to get in for damage, and this is the important part of the wording here, an attacking creature is still an attacking creature until the end of combat. So we can actually get in for damage, hit for 4 damage if we want. Then after damage is dealt, we can still untap it because it is an attacking creature still and get an inspired effect. So that is one way that you can do this. You can use inspired creatures to swing with them, and you don't have to worry about them getting hurt because we're going to use our commander's ability on them. So if they get blocked, doesn't matter. We're going to prevent all damage that gets dealt to them. There are other creatures like Stony Brook, Schoolmaster, and Fallow Sage that want to be tapped. So again, similar sort of scenario where we can attack with one of these, get the effect, whether it be the card draw or the 1/1 Merfolk Wizard creature token, and then untap them if we're worried about them getting blocked, right? And then we can prevent that damage. So we get the effect off of the attacking, which is essentially off the tapping, and then we can prevent them from dying. And then a card like Sky Hussar is a great fit in this theme as well that I just mentioned in one of my 10 cards videos. Personal favorite of mine. Fits nicely into this theme because it has forecast. We can tap 2 untapped white and or blue creatures we control and reveal Sky Hussar from our hand to draw a card. So in a white and blue tapping, untapping theme, it's a really great fit. Also, when it enters the battlefield, untaps all creatures you control. So it works really good in this sort of theme if you want to do that, because that's one of the only ways I think that this guy, other than just I'm using my commander as a Mazavith and maybe I want to play a Pillow Fort deck, you could do that. It's a really, really expensive Mazavith though, and there's just so many way better Pillow Fort effects in white and blue that I don't know if you necessarily want to do that. Again, the fact that you can't suspend it really, really holds it back. I do, however, have a really, really interesting combo that I came up with that you could throw in this deck, and this fits with everything else you're already doing, right? So you could do the theme that I already talked about with the tapping and untapping, but if you're looking for a really, really fun, interesting win con for this deck, it goes like this. You got a Fate Stitcher, okay? And a Fate Stitcher, again, is just a great fit in this deck. 3 and a blue zombie wizard, 1/2, has Unearth, pay a blue, but also tap. You may tap or untap another target permanent. That's a great ability to have in a commander game all around. You could just throw this card in any deck and it's going to be handy for you without question. So how does this work? We got our Fate Stitcher, okay? We're going to attack with it. We don't plan on dealing any damage, let me tell you. We're just going to attack with it, and then we're going to use our commander's ability, right? Untap target attacking creature, and we're going to prevent all damage. So obviously we don't have to worry about our Fate Stitcher getting blocked, but that's not the important part here. The important part here is we are untapping our Fate Stitcher, so now we can use its ability. And again, we're during combat here, so Fate Stitcher is still an attacking creature. Whether or not you untap or tap creatures has nothing to do with attacking. Once a creature is declared as an attacker, it is still an attacker until the end of combat unless it's removed from combat, and our If ability does not remove it from combat, right? Some of these effects actually remove the creature from combat. If does not. So now our Fate Stitcher is still attacking and untapped. Now we're going to use our Fate Stitcher's ability and untap another permanent, which is going to be our If, right? Our commander is now tapped. We're going to untap it with our Fate Stitcher, and now our Fate Stitcher is tapped. See if you can follow along here. So if untapped, Fate Stitcher tapped, then we're going to use If's ability again on our Fate Stitcher because it is still an attacking creature and it's now tapped. And you can see where this is going, right? We're just going to go back and forth and back and forth and back and forth, tapping and untapping and tapping and untapping. We can do this an infinite amount of times. Now, what good is that? Well, there is a card called Wake Thrasher, 2 and a blue, Merfolk Soldier, 1/1. Whenever a permanent you control becomes untapped, Wake Thrasher gets +1/+1 until end of turn. So what this allows us to do, if we also have our Wake Thrasher in play and it's also attacking, is make an infinitely big Wake Thrasher, right? We can make that 1,000 Wake Thrasher or whatever. We can just basically keep tapping and untapping until our Wake Thrasher is big enough to one-shot our opponent. And then on top of that, we can use our Fate Stitcher once we've untapped it the final time. It's also able to tap stuff, so we can even use it to tap down an opponent's blocker. If they have a blocker, we can now untap our Fate Stitcher. Our Wake Thrasher's big enough, and we can use our Fate Stitcher to tap down whatever blocker they might have, and we kill them. Really janky combo, really interesting fit though if you're in this deck. Again, the Fate Stitcher and Wake Thrasher actually do fit in this deck because you are doing lots of tapping and untapping in this deck, so they are actually good fits. So you know, you don't have to just build your deck around this combo. You can just throw these cards in here and maybe you can actually pull it off. It's a super janky combo, but it's also a super janky commander. Really, I mean, this is what I came up with. There's not a lot here. Again, the suspend is almost useless. It's almost might as well not be there. So what you end up with is a really, really expensive Mazavith, which isn't great. Again, I like the untapping theme. There's a lot you can do in Azorius colors with the whole untapping thing. And then on top of it, you can have that super janky combo that you can one-shot your opponents with. Again, that is not a situation where anyone's going to be upset by taking a one-shot by that Wake Thrasher. I seriously doubt it. And being able to pull that off once in a while would be really, really fun. But moving on to our number one commander this week, and man, you guys are really making me work this time. Mavren, Fein, Dusk, Apostle. 2 and a white, Vampire Cleric 2/2. Whenever one or more non-token vampires you control attack, create a 1/1 white vampire creature token with lifelink. So we're in a mono-white vampire theme. That's a tough one. What makes this particularly tough is whenever one or more non-token vampires, so you're only gonna get one off of this. Doesn't even matter how many opponents you attack. They really limited this ability. So you're only maximum going to get one of those tokens. It has to be a non-token creature attacking. There's not a ton of mono-white vampires. There is enough. There is a decent amount that you could just do mono-white vampires. However, our commander is a mono-white vampire, right? All you have to do is attack with your Mavren Fein and you will get that token. However, keep in mind that token does have lifelink, so that's an important thing to note as well. There are a couple of vampires like Paladin of Atonement and Famished Vampire that are mono-white vampires, but also are doing the life gain things. So we are hitting both of the areas that we want with those. I did not put all of the mono-white vampires in here. There's a lot of really bad ones, and I didn't want to just fill the deck up with horrible creatures that really aren't going to give us a huge benefit because all we're getting is a 1/1 token, right? I just did my Pegasus tribal deck where I talked about a similar theme where, I mean, this isn't a fringe tribe, but certainly in mono-white it is. If you're doing that, just shoehorning a bunch of bad creatures into your deck, I don't think is going to be the best way. You kind of got to find another way to do it. Obviously, we can do the changeling thing here. Mirror Entity is going to be a phenomenal fit as it is in most tribal decks. Even tribes that have lots of support, a Mirror Entity is great, and it's particularly going to be great here because those 1/1 tokens, we can make them a lot bigger. The best card in the deck is obviously going to be Welcoming Vampire, right? 2 and a white, Vampire 2/3 with flying. Whenever one or more other creatures with power 2 or less enter the battlefield under your control, you draw a card. This ability triggers only once each turn, so we can just attack with our Welcoming Vampire, which has evasion, and make the token, and when it enters the battlefield, we get to draw a card. That's pretty fantastic value. Unfortunately, there's not a lot of ways for us to get our Welcoming Vampire. There is one, though. Forerunner of the Legion. 2 and a white, Vampire Knight 2/2. When Forerunner of the Legion enters the battlefield, you may search your library for a vampire card. Reveal it, shuffle your library, and put that card on top. So this is a great way to go get our Welcoming Vampire, or any other vampires in the deck. I think we're probably likely going to be getting Welcoming Vampire with this. Also, though, whenever another vampire enters the battlefield under your control, target creature gets +1/+1 until end turn. So again, when we attack, that vampire token that is getting created is a vampire entering the battlefield. So we can give whatever that creature attacking is +1/+1. Also through Maskwood Nexus in the deck. Obviously making our creatures all into vampires, and we do have a fair amount of non-vampire creatures in this deck. And if we can get our hands on this, it's going to make it so that we can just attack with any creature and get that token. Also makes those 2/2 blue shapeshifter creature tokens with Changeling, which can also be helpful. Like I said, though, we can just attack with our commander. You really could go a very heavy Voltron theme here, even though, you know, a 2/2 creature with no abilities is not great a Voltron commander. I did throw Power Matrix in the deck because it is one of my favorites for this sort of theme, especially if you have an attack trigger, right? Power Matrix is going to give +1/+1 flying, first strike, and trample. And the flying for me is always the big one there because it's evasion. So it's going to be very easy for us to just attack with our commander if we want to get that token. We don't have to worry about getting blocked and dying. I also threw a couple of great equipments in here like Godsend and Maul of the Skyclaves, which again is going to sort of prevent our commander at the very least from dying when it attacks. Godsend gives +3/+3, and whenever equipped creature blocks or becomes blocked by one or more creatures, you may exile one of those creatures. So it's going to be at least a 5/5, and then if it gets blocked by maybe a bigger creature, we can exile that creature so our commander's not going to take any damage. Maul of the Skyclaves is a really great one. When it enters the battlefield, we can attach it to a creature we control, so we don't even have to pay the 2 white equip. An equipped creature gets +2/+2 and has flying and first strike. So that makes a pretty formidable creature. And again, the flying, I think, is the big one there where our commander now won't get blocked. I built more around the life gain theme though. I thought making those 1/1 vampire tokens with lifelink, it's going to be really easy for us to get those life gain triggers because we can just throw one of those vampire tokens at our opponents and whether they block or not, it's going to deal 1 damage and we're going to get that life gain trigger. So cards like Crested Sunmare and Regna the Redeemer are great because at the beginning of our end step, we're going to get more tokens. Archangel of Thune obviously is going to be the best fit here. It's an expensive card, and yes, there are some expensive cards in this deck, but it's tough when you build around these underwhelming commanders. It's hard to avoid the cards like this that work really well. Whenever you gain life, put a +1/+1 counter on each creature you control, which is just fantastic in this deck, right? If we attack with 3 of those vampire tokens, we're going to be gaining 3 separate instances of life, so we're going to get 3 +1/+1 counters on each creature we control, right? That's why you want the instance of life gain, right? You want separate triggers as much as possible because each one of those vampire tokens connecting is going to get us a life gain trigger. They're all separate, right? Dawn of Hope works the same way here, where whenever you gain life, you may pay 2. So if we want, we can do this 3 times if we attack with 3 tokens. Well-Lost Dreams, again, is just an auto-include in a theme like this. 4-mana artifact, whenever you gain life, you may pay X, where X is less than or equal to the amount of life you gained if you do draw X cards. So again, attacking with those 3 tokens, we're going to gain 3 life, right? This is all separate triggers, but really it doesn't really matter with Well-Lost Dreams, right? Whether it's separate or all at once, you just basically pay however much mana you want and draw that many cards. Cleric Class and Voice of the Blessed I also threw in here because they are just playing off of the life gain theme. And again, it is the instance of life gain, right? Cleric Class is just going to gain us double the life essentially. And also if we can get to level 2, whenever you gain life, put a +1/+1 counter on target creature you control. So that's going to be great. Voice of the Blessed can again be a closer for us. White and a white Spirit Cleric 2/2. Whenever you gain life, put a +1/+1 counter on Voice of the Blessed. As long as it has 4 or more counters on it, it has Flying and Vigilance. And as long as it has 10 or more counters on it, it has Indestructible. And if you can be getting in for damage a lot with those vampire tokens, it's going to be very easy to get counters on this guy really, really fast. Creating a lot of those tokens, so Mentor of the Meek and Rumor Gatherer are going to be great here. We're going to have lots of creatures entering the battlefield. We can pay 1 with Mentor of the Meek and draw a card, or with Rumor Gatherer, we can scry 1, and the second time we have a creature enter, we get to draw a card. So both great fits here. How are we going to close out the game? I thought Curse of Conformity was an interesting one. 4 and a white aura, curse, enchant player. Non-legendary creatures enchanted player controls have base power and toughness 3/3 and lose all creature types. So this is a really interesting card. So in this deck, you can actually throw this on your opponent if you want to. If your opponent has a bunch of really nasty creatures, or maybe they're playing a tribal theme themselves, you can shut off creature types here. It could be interesting there. Making their creatures into 3/3s might not be that great. I want to use this mostly on ourselves. And I know people will say, oh, but you're losing the creature types, so that shuts off your commander's ability. Yes, but it's non-legendary creatures, so our commander will still be a vampire. And I just think turning all those 1/1 vampire tokens into 3/3s is going to be a lot more formidable. We can do the same thing with Harmonious Archon. 4 white Archon 4/5 with flying. Non-Archon creatures have base power and toughness 3/3. And when it enters the battlefield, it makes a couple of 1/1 white human creature tokens. So again, our really small team all of a sudden becomes 3/3s. Our commander will be a 3/3 as well. All those 1/1 tokens we're making will be 3/3s. So they're going to be a lot scarier. Of course, throwing Anointed Procession here. Again, I mean, it's an expensive card, but you just got to in a token theme, especially a mono white token theme. How could you not put this in there, right? You got to try to include it in the deck if you can. Devout Invocation is another interesting way to close out the game. 6 and a white sorcery. Tap any number of untapped creatures you control. Put a 4/4 white angel creature token with flying onto the battlefield for each creature tapped this way. So now we can essentially turn all those little vampire tokens into 4/4 flying angels. We're still going to have them. We're not destroying them. We're just tapping them down. We're creating this giant team of angels with flying that, of course, are going to be able to close out the game a lot easier. And of course, Halo Fountain. This is the perfect deck for me to first include this card into. 2 and a white artifact. Pay white and tap. Untap a tapped creature you control. Create a 1/1 green and white citizen creature token. So it's in the token theme. We obviously are going to be attacking a lot, so untapping creatures isn't going to be difficult. Pay white and tap, and untap 2 tapped creatures you control to draw a card. So going to be great card draw in this deck. Again, we're throwing those vampire tokens at our opponents. Don't really care if they get blocked and die. And then of course we can pay white and tap untap 15 tapped creatures you control, you win the game. So are we going to get up to 15 creatures? It's possible. It is a possible win con in this deck. Definitely a good card though, even if you don't use that last ability. I think the first two abilities are going to be really handy in this deck for sure. Definitely an underwhelming commander, no question. Mavren, Fein, Dusk Apostle. You know, I mean, you're doing the mono white vampire thing, which is already tough. And then his ability is even not that great, right? The payoff here isn't fantastic. Just making one 1/1 white vampire token with lifelink every turn is not a huge payoff. You really got to go sort of the value theme, the life gain, right? That's why I thought, other than just throwing a bunch of vampires in this deck, it's like, okay, well now I'm just putting a really bad creature in this deck, and for what? So that I can get a 1/1 vampire creature token? That didn't seem worth it. I liked getting those life gain triggers and building around that theme a little more. So we're doing a couple of different things here. We are doing the vampire thing. It's a little bit of a Voltron strategy, and there's a whole bunch of those life gain things in here as well. So if you're interested in this deck at all, a lot of people voted for it, so the deck list for it is in the description below. Feel free to check it out if you want to. But that is it for today, and thanks for tuning in.